I still remember the morning we lost sight of them. It was the spring of 2015, a year after a brutal winter and an unusually dry monsoon. I was halfway through a transect survey in the buffer zone of the Ilam district, part of the newly protected eastern Himalayan red panda corridor. I had just knelt down to check some scats left along a mossy rock when the radio crackled. Last confirmed sighting, March. Not a trace since. At the time, I didn't know that message would mark the beginning of a 5-year silence. My name is Tenzing Rai. I'm a biodiversity officer with a local conservation GO, and for nearly 2 decades, I've worked in the forests of eastern Nepal, monitoring endangered species. Red pandas, Ilurus fulgens, are by far the most elusive. People call them fire foxes or forest ghosts, but in the villages around the Kanchenjunga Conservation Area, they're simply habra. There was a time, years ago, when elders swore they saw them more often than monkeys. I was born in one of those mountain villages. When I was a boy, I saw a red panda once, high up on a fir branch, tail hanging like a flame, licking dew from bamboo leaves. I never forgot it. That was in 1996. By 2015, I had gone nearly 6 years without a visual encounter. It wasn't just me. Our camera traps went cold, sightings from yak herders dried up, and most disturbingly, we found fewer signs. No fresh scat, no scratch marks, no feeding sites with peeled bamboo. We feared the worst, that a combination of habitat fragmentation, poaching, and climate stress had pushed the local population to collapse. We didn't give up. If anything, the silence made us more determined. In 2016, our NGO partnered with the Red Panda Network and the Department of National Parks and Wildlife Conservation to launch a habitat monitoring program that reached deep into the remotest ridgelines of Taplejung and Panchathar. We worked with community forest user groups, trained citizen scientists, and installed over 60 new camera traps. I remember the skepticism we faced, even from our own staff. The highland forests above 2,500 meters are not easy to patrol. Landslides regularly cut off footpaths. Leeches wait in the ferns during the monsoon. Snow blinds the trail in winter. A few times, our teams found traps meant for musk deer and pheasants, some laced with poisoned bait. Even in protected areas, the law doesn't always reach. But then in late 2017, something changed. A villager named Pasang brought us a picture of red panda tracks he'd seen in the snow near a bamboo thicket. I remember standing in the wooden office in Phungling Bazaar, looking at his photo, a line of oval paw prints, clear and crisp in the frost. It wasn't proof, not yet. But it was something. We hiked out that same week, despite the cold. We followed the ridgeline above the village of Olangchung Gola, where the cloud forest crests into a mix of rhododendron and silver fir. The place was silent, heavy with winter's breath. We looked for broken bamboo, scratch marks on trees, even fur caught on the bark, nothing. After 3 days, we turned back. Another dead end. Still, the local reports kept trickling in. In spring of 2018, a yak herder claimed to have seen a small reddish animal with a long tail dart across the slope above the Tiptala Pass. Then in autumn, schoolchildren in Gufa village told us they had seen one cross a footbridge early in the morning. Every report lit a small fire in us, but we couldn't confirm anything. Camera traps were our only hope. We invested in higher resolution units with longer battery life and heat motion sensors. I remember the day we installed one of the new models near a slope of dwarf bamboo outside Doban. The air was thick with mist, and the forest looked like it hadn't been disturbed in years. I said a silent prayer as I bolted the unit to the tree, not for luck, but for presence. For a trace. That trap recorded nothing but wind and night mice for months. Our turning point came in late 2019. We had begun to notice patterns in habitat resilience. In some areas, bamboo was growing back faster. Local reforestation efforts, often overlooked, were having subtle effects. A few patches of forest were becoming contiguous again after years of separation. We mapped these with GIS and compared them to our historical panda sightings. The overlap was promising. We refocused our camera efforts on 3 high-potential corridors, one of which was the Dobato Ridge that runs between 2 fragmented blocks of forest. It was steep, nearly inaccessible for most of the year, but with elevation, bamboo, and canopy cover, everything red pandas need. We set up 12 cameras along the route in January 2020. Then COVID-19 arrived. Field operations slowed to a crawl. For almost a year, our only access to the trap sites was through a handful of local guardians, trained volunteers who lived in the upper villages. We gave them masks, solar power packs, and data cards. They rotated through sites as conditions allowed, collecting images, replacing batteries, and checking for poaching signs. We didn't expect much. In January 2021, I received a call from Rinji Tamang, one of our community technicians. "Sir," he said, almost whispering, "it's back." I didn't believe it at first. I asked him to send the image to our shared drive. It took nearly 2 hours to upload through the village satellite connection. When the file finally opened on my screen, I froze. There it was. A red panda, clearly visible, standing with its head tilted, caught mid-step as it crossed a narrow log bridge beneath a canopy of fir trees. Its tail curled slightly to one side, a signature pose. The timestamp read December 29, 2020, 3:47 a.m. 5 years. 5 years of silence. And now, life. The photograph wasn't just a lucky shot. It was evidence of survival, of persistence, of hope. Over the next few days, I reviewed every frame from that camera. The panda had passed through the frame 3 times in 2 weeks. Even more exciting, a second, smaller panda, possibly a juvenile, appeared in one of the later images. That meant breeding. That meant recovery. We didn't announce anything right away. We had to be sure. We analyzed the data, verified the metadata, and compared fur patterns to earlier images from 2013, just in case we had an old individual returning. It was a new animal. And soon, more photos followed from other traps on the same ridge. At least 3 individuals, likely 2 adults and a subadult, were moving through the corridor. I visited the site that spring. The air was thin and crisp, the way it always is above 2,800 meters. Moss hung like lace from the trees. I climbed to the spot where the photograph was taken, that narrow log bridge, and I just stood there for a long time. I thought of the years of silence. The villagers who had kept watch. The volunteers who hiked for days. The forests that had waited patiently to stitch themselves whole again. And I thought of that red panda, stepping softly through the fog, unaware of the small miracle it carried on its back, the weight of a future no one had been sure would return. But it had, and that was only the beginning. By the time word spread to Kathmandu, we had verified 5 distinct sightings across 3 camera trap sites in the Dobato corridor. Each image brought with it the kind of cautious excitement conservationists rarely allow themselves. In this line of work, you learn to temper hope. Too many false leads, too many years of loss. But there was no denying it now. Red pandas had returned. Still, for a long time, we didn't say anything publicly. That decision wasn't easy. Some donors were urging us to issue a press release. They said it would help raise awareness, attract funding, even tourism. But I knew better. A red panda, even a thriving group, is a fragile thing. And in a forest still healing from years of degradation, attention can be dangerous. Sometimes, the worst thing you can do for an endangered species is to show the world exactly where it is. So we kept quiet, and we planned. We knew that finding a few individuals in one corridor wasn't a recovery, it was a thread. To weave it into something stronger, something lasting, we needed to know more. Were these pandas resident or simply passing through? Was there breeding? Were other corridors active? How stable was the bamboo undergrowth? We needed science, and we needed trust. That spring, I assembled a team of field biologists, GIS technicians, and local trackers, the best mix of modern tools and ancestral knowledge we could gather. We called the project Habra Sarakshia, or Red Panda Watch. Our goal was simple: map panda movement across the Dobato corridor and assess its potential to serve as a viable habitat link between fragmented forest blocks. It started with data. We overlaid camera trap images, GPS logs from our trackers, and satellite vegetation indices from the past 10 years. What emerged surprised us. The pandas were moving through altitudes between 2,600 and 3,000 meters, slightly lower than expected. Some of the forest blocks they were using had previously been written off as marginal. It was possible that bamboo regeneration, combined with lower disturbance from human activity during the pandemic, had opened up temporary windows for safe movement. Temporary, unless we acted. We expanded our trap lines by 30% and began a direct scat collection campaign for genetic analysis. Fecal DNA would help us identify individuals, determine kinship, and possibly even measure stress hormone levels. Our volunteers hiked out for weeks at a time, often with only a backpack and a sleeping bag, collecting samples in vials of ethanol. We trained them to recognize bamboo bite patterns, to note the angle of the droppings, even to record the exact altitude and time of day. One of those volunteers, a young man named Dinesh, found a fresh sample just 100 meters from one of our busiest village trails. It was a wake-up call. The pandas were closer than we thought, and more vulnerable. Livestock grazing, forest firewood collection, and stray dogs were potential threats, even if unintentional. That's when we realized the corridor wasn't just about trees and maps, it was about people. In the village of Gufa, where the schoolchildren had first mentioned seeing the red panda, we launched our first Panda Guardian workshop. We invited every household to attend. It was the middle of May, rhododendrons in bloom, clouds rolling in thick from the Arun Valley. Over tea and biscuits, we explained the sightings, the camera trap data, and what it meant. At first, people were skeptical. Many hadn't seen a red panda in their lifetime. Some thought it was already extinct. But then we showed the photographs, that single, unmistakable image of the panda crossing the log bridge, its eyes caught in mid-blink. The room went quiet. Then someone clapped. Within weeks, we had more than 20 volunteers signed up from 3 villages. They agreed to patrol sensitive forest areas, report suspicious activity, and even help repair damaged habitat. We provided them with uniforms, solar chargers, and laminated tracking sheets. Many had grown up in these forests. They were our best hope. That summer, something extraordinary happened. In July 2021, a pair of camera traps along the eastern flank of the corridor captured footage of 2 red pandas, not just passing by, but foraging, climbing, grooming. One camera recorded footage over 4 consecutive nights. The male was older, with a slightly notched ear. The female was smaller, with a distinctive white patch above her left eye. On August 3, at 2:15 a.m., the female appeared alone, and clearly pregnant. I remember watching that footage late into the night, replaying it again and again. Every conservationist dreams of this moment, not just proof of presence, but proof of potential. A birth would mean territory. Territory would mean roots. We knew we couldn't observe the birth directly. Red pandas are notoriously private mothers, often nesting high in hollow trees or dense bamboo thickets. But we shifted more camera traps into the area, careful not to disturb any known denning sites. The footage slowed, and then, for 6 weeks, we saw nothing. Then came the cub. It was late September. A local guardian named Maya spotted a small rust-colored figure clambering through the underbrush behind her family's cardamom field. She thought it was a monkey at first, until she saw the tail. We retrieved the nearest camera and checked the logs. Sure enough, a tiny red panda, barely the size of a house cat, was captured on video, following closely behind the female we'd been tracking. It stumbled. It chewed on bamboo. It watched the lens curiously, tilting its head before disappearing into the mist. That was the moment I knew things had changed. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about return. We began mapping potential denning trees, measuring hollow depths and canopy coverage. We monitored bamboo growth rates and climate data. Our GIS team used drone footage to build 3D models of the terrain, to predict where future dens might occur, where the forest needed stitching, and where danger still lingered. But the truth is, science could only take us so far. The turning point came from the community. In October, the Panchathar Community Forest User Group passed a local regulation limiting bamboo harvesting during the red panda breeding season. It wasn't mandated by the government. It came from the villagers themselves. The same month, Gufa's schoolchildren organized a mural project, painting a giant red panda on the side of their schoolhouse with the slogan, Hamro Ban, Hamro Habra, our forest, our red panda. And in November, for the first time, we held a joint patrol exercise with the local forest office, village guardians, and my team. We spent 3 days in the field, crossing 30 kilometers of ridgeline, checking camera traps, collecting scat, and removing snares. On the last day, we held a ceremony at the log bridge where the first photo was taken. We didn't say much, just stood there, looking at the place where a species had come back to us, not with fanfare, but with quiet steps. I still think about that bridge. It's not remarkable, really, just a fallen log across a shallow ravine. Mossy, worn, probably a century old. But for one moment, it carried the weight of everything we'd been trying to do. And the camera, a simple, silent box of plastic and wires, had been there to witness it. To capture what we could not see ourselves. By the end of 2021, we had confirmed 5 distinct individuals in the Dobato corridor, including 1 cub. 3 were likely female. 2 had overlapping ranges. The forest, once thought empty, was breathing again. But we also knew this was just the beginning. Because as the pandas came back, so did the risks. Word began to spread beyond the villages. Curious trekkers appeared on old trails. Local traders began asking about panda tourism. There were rumors of illegal collectors offering money for sightings. For every step forward, the path ahead became more delicate. And yet, for the first time in years, we had a path. One worn by soft paws and carried by wind, by data, by stories, and by the quiet faith of people who had waited years for a glimpse of something red moving through green. We didn't know what the future would hold. But we knew this much: they were here. They had returned, and it was up to us to make sure they stayed. By early 2022, I had seen more red pandas on camera than in the last 10 years of fieldwork combined. 6 confirmed individuals, 2 juveniles, 4 adults, were moving regularly through the Dobato corridor and its adjacent slopes. This wasn't just a recovery. It was a turning point. In one of Nepal's most fragmented forest regions, a species we feared lost had not only survived, it had started reclaiming space. And yet, in the moments between those camera downloads and field reports, I kept asking myself, what does recovery actually mean? Is it a photograph? A cub? A breeding pair? Or is it something deeper, harder to measure, but more important? That spring, I hiked the entire Dobato corridor alone, from the southernmost bamboo grove near Doban to the high-altitude saddle above Chiwabanjiang, where the clouds roll like slow rivers over the Singhalila range. I took no camera, just a notebook and a GPS. I wanted to walk it like the pandas did, quietly, instinctively, reading the forest through scent and slope and shadow. The signs were there. Bamboo sprouting in stepped layers, like green flares rising through the mist. Claw marks on alder trunks. A scent post, a cluster of urine-stained moss under a boulder, likely a male's territorial marker. I followed a series of scratch prints along a ridge until they vanished into the canopy. Each trace was small, insignificant, maybe, on its own. But together, they formed a map, not of territory, but of possibility. Because that's what the red panda needs most. A possibility that stretches from tree to tree, from season to season, uninterrupted. And that kind of possibility is fragile. That same year, a wildfire scorched over 50 hectares of forest just west of our monitoring zone. It started from a cooking fire in an unregulated trekking shelter. No one was hurt, but dozens of square kilometers of habitat went up in smoke. Worse, it came dangerously close to a known nesting site. We'll never know if any red pandas were lost. It was a reminder that protection isn't a moment, it's a constant act. We responded fast, not with fences or guards, but with what we knew worked: communities. Within 2 weeks, we had built fire breaks around high-risk zones. Local guardians conducted early warning patrols. We sourced fog nozzles and lightweight water tanks from India. Children learned fire drills at school. Fire, like poaching or deforestation, was something everyone could fight, together. In August 2022, we caught footage of a subadult panda moving through the very same ridge. Maybe it had survived the blaze. Maybe it was passing through. Either way, it proved something we rarely talk about in conservation: resilience. Because in truth, nature is not waiting for us to save it. It is constantly adapting, regenerating when it can, receding when it must, fighting always to survive. What we offer, at best, is a little more room. And we had to offer more. In September, we began our most ambitious project yet. reconnecting the Dobato corridor with the larger forest block east of Taplejung. The two areas had once been linked, but decades of farming, road construction, and firewood harvesting had severed the canopy. Red pandas can't cross open fields. They need trees above and bamboo below, always. We worked with 12 community forest user groups across 3 districts to identify critical pinch points. Then we launched Ban Ko Pul, Bridge of the Forest. Over 6 months, we planted more than 18,000 native trees, rhododendron, oak, Himalayan birch, and fir. Along the lower slopes, we introduced 3 species of clumping bamboo known to survive dry seasons. Local nurseries grew saplings. Schools organized planting days. Entire families joined in, sometimes walking for hours with baskets of seedlings on their backs. We didn't just plant trees, we built agreements. Under new community protocols, villagers now rotate firewood harvesting zones, leaving regrowth corridors intact. Livestock is corralled during the red panda birthing season. And perhaps most importantly, 4 high-risk areas were designated as silent zones: no grazing, no felling, no entry without permission. We marked them with hand-painted signs: Habra Ko Gar, home of the red panda. At first, compliance was mixed. Some herders resisted. One man confronted us angrily after his grazing permit was denied. But a year later, his grandson joined our Panda Guardian program. I've learned that change in the mountains doesn't happen through rules, it happens through stories. And the red panda has become a story worth telling. By 2023, we had accumulated over 60 confirmed camera trap images, 22 scat samples for DNA analysis, and 3 unique vocalizations recorded on our acoustic monitors. We even documented a brief social interaction between 2 adults, a rare event in a species known for solitude. All signs pointed to a slow but steady rise in population. But more than numbers, it was the people who changed. In Gufa, the same school where we held our first mural project, red panda conservation is now part of the curriculum. Children learn tracking signs before they learn algebra. They use recycled paper to make panda masks for local festivals. A 7-year-old girl named Pema wrote a story about a red panda who saves her village from a forest fire. It won a national prize. And in Phungling, the district headquarters where I first saw that log bridge photo, the annual Habra Mela now draws hundreds of people. They come not to see pandas, but to celebrate them. With music, with food, with pledges to do better. In a world where so much feels fragile, the red panda has become a symbol of what we still have the power to protect. And as for me, I don't watch the camera traps every day anymore. I still hike, still patrol, still sit in the forest when the mist comes down like a veil and listen for the sound of bamboo creaking under the weight of something small, red, and wild. But I don't wait for sightings the way I once did. Because I've learned that the red panda doesn't exist for our observation. It exists for itself. And our job is not to catch it in a frame, but to make sure the frame remains unbroken. In December 2024, we received a final image before the winter snow buried our traps. A young red panda, perched mid-branch, silhouetted against the rising sun. It had the same white eye patch as the female we first saw in 2020. The cub had grown up. It had stayed. And in its quiet gaze, steady, unafraid, aware, I saw everything we had worked for. Not a return to what was, but a beginning of what could be.